Good morning, everyone. This is Nick Raquel, live from New York. Magandang gabi sa Philippines. Magandang umaga dito sa US. Okay. I will just want to give a very quick update as to the exceptions to the series of proclamation orders or issued by Trump, suspending the entry of some immigrant and non-immigrant visa holders or aliens that pose a risk to the U.S. labor market. So this is actually a series of suspensions that the U.S. government has implemented since the COVID pandemic becomes a crisis or a critical issue in the United States. So as usual, if may mga tanong kayo, pakisulat lang sa comments below and we will try to respond to those queries as we move forward. So this is a very short presentation because ito lang ay ang update as to the exceptions. So my responses to or my materials will actually cover based on the responses or information we receive either from the U.S. Embassy abroad or other research na rin sa other group chats, in particular doon sa mga J1 visa holders. Kasi maraming mga nagtatanong whether or not there are updates to the J1 visa or whether or not they will be part of the exception. So stay tuned and I will try to respond to your queries as we move forward. Okay? So I will be switching gears or slides, either me talking or to the slides itself. So again, ang official title natin dito are exceptions to presidential proclamations. Again, yung 114 and 152 are series of proclamations issued sometime in April and it was also updated in June. And again, these exceptions are only valid up to December 31 this year. It will be reviewed. Actually, the rule says that it will be reviewed 30 days from the issuance on June 24. That was last week. And then 2 months thereafter, it will be reviewed again, depending on the situation of the COVID-19 pandemic. So again, this is not a final situation of what U.S. immigration is. It will be continuously to be reviewed, and we hope that COVID-19 situation will be improved or be better in the coming days para mas maging maluwang na rin ang regulations natin in terms of entries to the United States. So again, salamat sa mga nag-tune in. Hindi ko na isa-isahin kasi marami na rin kayo. And again, thank you for your continuous support. And then again, kung may tanong kayo, isulat nyo lang sa comment section. So reminder lang, I will be answering your questions, specific questions. Generally speaking, don't take my advice as a specific advice to you. If you would want to discuss your case in more detailed conversation and specific, and I apologize if I would be spending too much time on one topic because again, I'm not talking to one person. I'm talking to hundreds of people watching to us. So expect me to take some time talking about one specific topic or issue. And then after that, let's jump into the proclamation. So again, itong reminder lang natin na the latest proclamation of Trump suspending entries of non-immigrant and immigrant visa holders took effect on June 24, and then it will be valid up to December 31, 2020, but it can be extended, it can be shortened depending on the situation of the pandemic. Next, ang pag-usapan natin dito are the suspension covering the non-immigrant visa holders, H-1B, the L-1 and the J-1 visa, including their dependents. So in the case of the H-1B visa holders, ito yung mga H-4, then yung mga J-1 visa, the J-2s, L-1 dependents as well. Okay, pag-usapan na rin natin dito mamaya ang updates ng US Embassy Manila. No? So at least alam natin ang situation. So the general rule is, nililimit nila ang holders of the non-immigrant visa J, H, at saka L. But this does not cover people on those categories who are it only covers for people who are outside the United States. So ibig sabihin nun, if you are an H1 visa holder or an L1 or you are a J1 visa holder, but you are in the United States, you are not covered by the suspension. No? And if you are being confronted of whether or not you will be able to extend, yes, you may still be able to extend. I don't recommend you to go out. because pag lumabas ka, maghihingi ka ngayon ng bagong visa stamp, and then the embassy may not entertain you. So if you are in the United States, you are not covered by the suspension, and if you are worried about the extension ng mga visa nyo, you will still be able to have an extension approved while in the United States. So again, the suspension only covers for people outside the United States. So the suspension also covers na kunwari, may H1 ka, L1 ka, or J1 visa holder ka, but you already have been issued a visa before June 24 this year, then you are not covered by the suspension. So you will still be able to enter the United States on those visa stamps because you were given that visa before the effectivity of the suspension. Number three, even if you don't have a valid visa, but you were given a travel permit for whatever reason, you are an H1, J1, L1 visa holder, you let go out of the US and you were given a travel permit by the Department of State or by USCIS, then you will still be able to come back in. So you are not covered by the suspension. But at the same time, it does not cover any green card holder. So kung kunwari, nasa labas ka ng US, you are holding a valid green card, then you will still be able to come in to the United States. If you are spouse or child of a US citizen, you will still be able to enter the United States despite the suspension. And any alien seeking to enter the US to provide temporary labor or essential services to the United States. So, ito yung mga part of the exceptions na if you are H1, L1, J1, but you are part of the essential services provider in the supply chain or for fighting COVID, you will still be able to enter the United States. Again, number four, ito yung medyo vague ang conversation because the government has not really given specific examples of who will be covered, but we're going to talk about that. Any alien whose entry would be in the national interest. And the national interest is a very big conversation on what that covers. But if we were gonna go through the list mamaya, if you notice, majority of the conversations around national interests are those activities or professionals engaged in fighting COVID, or if you will be invited by the specific government agency to fight COVID or to be involved in any criminal investigation, yun pwedeng papasok yun sa national interests waiver. So again, we just have covered what the general proclamations issued in June, and then tingnan natin if you are part of the exceptions. But before I go to that, let me just read some of the questions here kung meron tayo. Okay, so we have a question here from Lynn. Attorney, nabigyan po kami ng visa kaso nag-expired na dahil sa flight cancellation. Yung visa namin issued noong March pa. Okay, Bob, we'll talk about that sa next slides ko. I actually have covered about expiring visas. Ma'am Merlin, please ask your lawyer, ma'am, anong status ng visa ng anak mo po. Okay, so tuloy-tuloy na tayo, no? So we just covered suspension does not cover. So remind lang natin sa mga hindi masyadong nakakaintindi. H1 visa are pertaining to the especially occupation. So minimum requirement dito dapat bachelor's degree holder ka. The problem lang is H1B visa is in our through lottery yung selection. So sobrang dami ng mga applicants but there's only 65,000 visa numbers available. Then nilalottery na lang siya kasi hindi na nila kaya ma-manage kung sino yung pipiliin. Normally it's being the lottery is being conducted between March to April of every year unless yung employer mo are H1B cap exempt. So there are requirements to be cap exempt. So ibig sabihin nun, hindi kayo part ng lottery, but you will still be able to hire people on H1B. So we're not going to go through the details of that, but I will just cover around what those visa classifications are. Ano bang papasok doon sa H1B occupation? So magsiswitch lang ako ng slides. para mas malaki yung view. Okay. You may not still be able to read it. But ang sinasabi dito, you are still able to come to the United States if you are an H-1B visa holder and you intend to travel to the United States for purposes of, or you are a public health or healthcare professional or researcher to alleviate the effects of COVID-19. So again, ito yung pinag-uusapan natin, that these are national interest exceptions that the government has issued or has clarified after the issuance of proclamation suspending entries of some non-immigrant visas. So, pag H-1B visa holder ka, ang yung trabaho mo is you are a healthcare professional or you are engaged in some research to fight COVID, then you might be able to enter the United States or be issued by with a visa by the U.S. Embassy abroad. Or if your travel supported by a request from the U.S. government agency or entity to meet some critical foreign policy objectives. So, kagaya na dito yung um, performing research, providing IT services, or engaging other similar projects essential to the government agency. So, as far as the H1 category is concerned, very specific lang yung mga exceptions. Either you are a professional engaged in any type of activity geared towards combating COVID-19, or if you are actually being invited by a U.S. government agency, then you may contact the embassy either to schedule your appointment because you are part of the exceptions of the national interests, or because nag-expire na yung visa mo, then you could actually request for a replacement of your visa. So that's for the H1 category. The J1 visa, ito yung maraming apektado. This is not an employment visa. This is actually an exchange visa program between the United States and the Philippines to maraming categories dito. No? So hindi lang teachers, may mga researchers din, may mga professors, au pairs, and then including the dependents. So pag-usapan natin ngayon kung pasok ba yung mga J1 visa visitors exception. So dito maraming nag-inquire, and particularly mga J1 visa teachers natin. And it's there is a basis of saying whether or not they are part of the exception. But if you look into the bullets here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bullets. 6 out of 7 only talks about people who are in the au pair category. So yung mga au pair category are involved in babysitting, but also in relation to COVID-19. So kung kunwari, you are actually providing care, giving support to some family or U.S. citizen individuals, and your assistance is needed to prevent them from being a public charge, then you might be able to argue your case that you are part of the national interest waiver, or you are being invited by a government agency, again, to provide support either to their families or to the government agency providing that particular service as well. But ang gusto kong pag-usapan dito are yung exchange visitor program affecting teachers. Kasi dalawang bullets dito ang nagsasabi na, hey, if you are a teacher and you are part of an MOU or an agreement that has been entered into by and between two governments for the purpose of promoting national interests objectives, then you may be able to apply for an exception. So, I've done some research, including not only the U.S. Embassy in Manila, but also other embassies abroad. Walang masyadong clear decision of whether or not yung teachers involved in the exchange visitor program are being given exception as a national interest. Pero wala ring nagsasabi na hindi pwede. And I am not so sure if may mga nanonood ngayon who actually had requested for an interview at the Embassy Manila and they were issued a visa, they might as well, if you could share that information so we could broadcast it. But so far what we found out is if you are a teacher and if you are involved in any research combating COVID-19, then ito yung mga J1 teachers na nabibigyan or researchers na nabibigyan ng exception to the suspension. Uh, that also includes yung mga specialized student teacher researchers who are also directly related to COVID-19. Nabibigyan din sila ng J1 visa and they were actually able to enter the United States. Another group of exceptions that talk about teachers here are what we call the specialized teachers na ang program number nila starts with a J5, G5, or an A3. No, G3 at saka G5. So, if you are a J1 teacher and if you look into your DS 2019, yung program nyo normally starts with an NO, 00 series yan. So, if you just look into the exceptions here and you look into bullets number 4 and 5, hindi kayo pasok doon. Kasi the only exceptions given to the trainees and the special teachers are those people whose DS 2019 starts with a G5 or an 8 or a G3. So tingnan mo na lang. So how do we now suggest you solve yung issue kung ano ba talaga? Pasok ba ang J1 teachers? Kasi if you look into that, ang sabi nila, if the MOU has been signed by the government between the Philippines and the US before the implementation of the proclamation, which was actually in sometime in April 23 or 24, then you might be able to argue na pasok tayo sa exception. So, what I would recommend if you really strongly believe that, hey, I have signed a contract and my contract will be compromised because open pa naman din ang schools dito sa United States, I would recommend that you schedule an appointment with the US Embassy and then depending kung anong response ng embassy, you might be able to be given a chance. So I'm not giving false hopes, but what I'm just trying to say is hindi very clear ang stance ng US Embassy as far as the J1 teachers exchange visitor program is concerned. So maybe if some of you will be lucky enough to be given a visa, you could actually share it in social media and other people would follow. Okay? Yun lang yung gusto kong sabihin dun sa J1 visa. The L1, again, ito yung mga intra-company transferees. So then again, they are also part of the suspension unless they will be able to show that their activities are directly related to combating COVID-19 and then yun lang yung paraan para mabigyan sila ng visa. So, hindi na gumagana ng aking mouse. Okay. Continuing. We'll look into kung may mga visa pa tayo dito. Ay mga questions na. Sian Villegas. Attorney Nick may ask, I just recently follow up my 221G missing documents requested by US Embassy after passing the interview last year. Okay, so sir, hindi masyadong klaro sa akin yung question. Jigs, tourist visa. Sir, I think my first question is, will tourist visa holders from Manila be allowed to get out of the Philippines? I think they actually issued a public announcement last week that if you are a tourist visa holder, you are not allowed to leave the Philippines. So, I think yun yung sagot. Hindi ka rin makatravel if you are a tourist visa holder. I am waiting for my interview and medical appointment. Is it still suspended? My mother was my petitioner. Family status by lost my husband. Over age. Okay. So, ma'am, continue na tayo sa US Embassy Manila updates, right? Okay. Routine visa services canceled until August 28. So, supposedly, mag-reopen na. So, as a matter of fact, the embassy already started interviewing people who already have their medical exam completed. If they are able to travel to the embassy kasi nasa Manila sila ngayon and they are already have paid all the fees. they started calling out applicants who had originally been scheduled sometime in March and April. So I guess they are actually looking into that and prioritizing based on who actually had set an interview prior to the lockdown. They started calling them. Either they send emails or they are calling the applicants themselves and asking if they are available for an interview. But that was until this week, that the embassy has issued a public announcement that the routine services is being cancelled until August 28. Again, these are all related to COVID-19. No? Pero may mga exceptions pa rin doon. If you believe that your child will be aging out, or if your if your medical exam result will be expiring, you need to contact the embassy. They have a specific number or email address that you have to use to be able to communicate with them. There are formatting issues as far as ano bang header na isusulat nyo dun sa email for them to be able to acknowledge your email address and request for that. But it still is being decided on a case-to-case basis. So even if sinasabi nila na publicly they are closed, but exceptionally they are entertaining some applicants to be entertained. So let's finish the remaining 5 slides and then let's see if you pasok kayo doon sa exception ng routine visa interviews. Medical exam result extended for 1 month, right? So yung mga na-issuehan na ng visa, they are the visa validity, which is normally is maximum of 6 months, is normally tied up to kung kailan valid yung inyong medical exam. So alam natin na people who are actually placed on sputum test or suspected TB and has been cleared, they were actually given short-term visa validity of up to 3 months or 4 months. So directly related yung visa validity nyo doon sa medical exam validity. So ang sinasabi nila, if you are already given a visa but you were not able to travel because of the restrictions, they are willing to extend your medical exam results to another 1 month. And if your visa has already been expired, then you have to contact the embassy to be able to be given a 1 month extension and make sure that you travel to the United States. Ang sinasabi din nila, pag kunwari na interview ka na pero hindi ka pa nabibigyan ng visa, but mag-expire na yung medical exam mo, even given the 1 month extension, you also have to call the embassy or contact the embassy through email para mabigyan kayo ng visa extension or para ma-issue yung visa niyo. Okay? That's far as the medical exam is concerned. K1 visa interview scheduling on hold. So sa ngayon, the embassy is saying that they are not entertaining K1 visa interviews. But again, we've heard some of our clients who have been originally scheduled sometime in January and February and who are living within Manila, Metro Manila, and being able to travel to the embassy. Some of them are being contacted directly by the embassy personnel and set up their interviews. So again, these are public announcement, but there are exceptions that be followed by the embassy. So, but I don't think calling the embassy now if you are generally falling into the K1 visa category. Klaruhin ko lang ha, K1 visa is a non-immigrant visa. Though for purposes of scheduling, they are being considered as non-immigrant visa. Pero, sorry, as an immigrant visa. So, pero non-immigrant pa rin. Binibigyan lang sila ng different treatment because as soon as they enter the United States, they get married and apply for a green card anyway. But technically, they are a non-immigrant visa holder. Okay. Expiring visa extension. So ito yung mga nabigyan na ng visa were not able to come to the United States because of the pandemic or other circumstances beyond their control. Generally speaking, the embassy is not extending visa. So what they are trying to say is, pag nabigyan ka ng visa and it has a validity date, make sure that you enter the United States while the visa is still valid. However, there is an exception to that. If the applicant will be able to argue or to prove that the reason bakit hindi siya nakapunta ng US are due to circumstances beyond their control, in this particular example, COVID and the cancellation of flights, that's beyond your control, then you will be able to be given an extension of your visa. So the problem is they are relying on to go to accept applications in that regard for visa extensions. Uh, since the lockdown in Manila has started, to go just opened last June 28th, and then I'm not so sure this week if they close again because of the closure extension ng embassy up to August 28th. So I would recommend that you contact you to go nearest you if they are already accepting packages for the embassy. And if that happens, then you could start sending your request for visa extension. So as to the details of that, again, you have to submit your passport as well as your argument bakit hindi kayo nakalipat on that. So yun yung procedure nila sa expired visa or expiring visa. F2A, I think ito yung maraming questions sa inyo. Kaya hindi ko muna sinasagot yung mga tanong dahil dito rin kayo papasok. So, we've contacted the embassy because then again, uh, conflicting ang treatment ng US Embassy in terms of the F2A. And F2A are actually spouses of green card holders or minor children of green card holder petitioners. So, what we've observed so far are that pag ikaw nagbayad na ng fees, kumpleto na yung medical exam mo, and you're either aging out, mag-age 21 ka na, they are actually accommodating you. As a matter of fact, the embassy is proactively calling candidates or applicants that hey, mag-age out ka na in a particular date. Do you want to have an expedited appointment? In that case, they either call you or they will send you an email. If you don't receive any of those, and you believe that you are aging out, or again, if your medical exam is expiring soon, I would encourage you to contact the embassy and then ask for an expedited appointment. That's how you're gonna, and then the embassy will decide on a case-to-case basis. So, generally speaking, they are not announcing that they are processing F2A applications. But if you believe that you are eligible for expedited appointment, either you are aging out or your medical exam is expiring, then I would recommend to contact them. Okay, so this is an example of our email to the embassy clarifying their stance as far as F2A scheduling, and the response is we are going to decide on F2A application in a case-to-case basis. Okay. If aging out, pakisulat dun sa subject ng email nyo that the applicant is aging out. So at least kung makikita nila doon. So that's basically the last slide of my update today. But before I log off, I will just try to respond to some of the questions here. Ruby, kung family-based visa po hindi suspended, what if kung visa on arrival NA3 admission class? Okay, ma'am, NA3 admission class ay visa on arrival pertains to infants, ma'am. Pakiklaro lang yung questions mo. So, visa on arrivals, there are actually exceptions to the rule that hey, the applicant need not to have a separate petition or need not to have a visa, but the officer at port of entry may give them an NA3 classification, and they will create some form admission as immigrant at the port of entry. So the general guidelines of the embassy is before flying to the United States, if you contact uh, the the permanent resident visa services, and if you could actually ask a letter from them, recommendation, or you could contact the airline to allow you to travel to the United States, and then upon arrival, an officer at port of entry will be issuing you an A3 visa, N8, N83 visa. So, ang tanong mo, uh, kung family-based visa po hindi suspended, what if kung ang visa arrival? So again ma'am, yung NA3 mo doesn't have to appear for interview in Manila, but you just have to contact the embassy for some letter of recommendation allowing you to travel, because the airline may not allow you to travel without that letter of recommendation. But if either the embassy will give you a letter or the airline will allow you to fly to the United States and then present your case to the officer at the port of entry, then they might give you an A3 visa. Ma'am Ashlyn, F2A, what is the status? So then again, if you believe that your medical exam is expiring soon or if your child is aging out, send or contact the embassy for an expedited appointment. They will decide on your case in a case-to-case basis. Mela de la Cruz, we are under F1. Na-interview na po noong February. Diffuse po kayo tutuwan si June, nag-email po. Na-mail back na po namin noong August na expire na medical exam. Ma'am, so kung nag-interview na kayo, and then 221G, if you need to understand that skeletal force na ang embassy natin ngayon, I would recommend that you contact the embassy because mag-expire yung medical nyo. But then again, the embassy has issued that your medical results are extended for another month. But don't wait for that. You could follow up with the embassy for an expedited release of your visa or issuance of your visa. Right? Yun lang yung may recommend ko. Kasi tutuwan na kayo, interview na kayo, you will not be re-interviewed again. Love, sorry, you mean po K1 na na-approve by USSS, magpag-visa Pinas. Okay, so ma'am, hindi suspended ang K1 visa. Ang ino-on hold lang is if na-approve na yung visa mo ng USCIS, the embassy in Manila is not going to schedule an appointment for K1. Except for some medical emergency perhaps, kung may sakit yung petitioner, and then you might be able to be granted an expedited appointment. A serious medical illness on the part of the petitioner is a valid ground to have an expedited appointment. So if your case is like that, then send an approval. But other than that, generally the embassy will not schedule an interview for K1 visa in Manila. How about J1 Teachers Program with P3? So then again, ma'am, if you actually look into the national interest exception for the J1, ang nakasulat lang doon is they are going to issue a visa for people whose program number starts with a G3 or a G5. So if your number starts with a P3, it doesn't seem to be the case. But if you really believe that this program has been agreed upon before the suspension took effect, I would not stop you from contacting the embassy, then ask whether or not you will be part of the national interest exemption. From Lynn, mabibigyan po kami ulit ng visa, kasama po kami sa entry ban, nag-expire na kasi visa namin due to flight cancellation. So, ma'am, kung F2A ka and your visa was issued before before August 24, then you might be eligible for a visa extension. Then communicate with the embassy kung open na yung to go sa place nyo to request for the visa replacement or extension, then argue your case bakit hindi kayo nakalipad agad. No? So again, flight cancellation is beyond your control. It falls within the allowed or reasonable exception, so you might have a chance. So contact the embassy as soon as time possible. Paul, what is the status with G2? My visa is a J1 visa holder in the States. So um, again, the suspension on the J1 includes the dependents. So if the J2 visa holder is still outside the United States as of June 24 and you don't have a valid visa at that point, then you are covered by the suspension. Ma'am Cynthia, yeah, I actually just talked about J1 teachers. So if after the Facebook Live, if you can just review, replay the live, we've talked about the J1. So may mga exceptions dun, ma'am. And I've also talked about what's your remedy in terms of contacting the embassy if you fall into the exception. Ma'am, J3, J5, they are basically directly related with U.S. government agencies or U.S. government sponsored programs. So if your case is if your DS 2019 does not show G3 or G5, then wag na nating perapan sarili natin. You're not part of the exceptions. But kung P3 ka, again, try to communicate if you fall into the national interest exception. But as per published rules, ang ina-allow lang nila ngayon is G3, G5. So you can just look into your DS 2019. If your program does not start with a G3, G5, then generally speaking, you are not part of the exceptions. But again, try to argue your case para malay mo, mapakalusot. CR1 visa green card holder po, petitioner. So, if you are already at USCIS or if you are still at the National Visa Center, yes, tuloy-tuloy pa rin yung process na yon. Ang nagiging affected lang, boss, is yung in-person services. Because of COVID situations, the embassy has canceled in-person services until August 28 in the US Embassy in Manila. Paul, if the J1 falls into the exceptions, then necessarily the J2 will also be part of the exception. Pero so again, pag nasa Philippines pa yung J2 mo, wala pa siyang visa, the J1 is in the United States, then unfortunately kung part siya ng suspension kung hindi pa siya na issuean ng visa as of June 24. Isa-isahin ko na lang on the Alexis, yes, yung F2A tuloy-tuloy pa rin. Again, sinasabi ko, if you are still at the USCIS level or if you are still at the NBC level, tuloy-tuloy pa rin process mo, you're still going to submit documents. Ang apektado lang talaga are the embassy processes, particularly yung visa interview at saka visa issuance. Anika, 221G, F2A turning 21. Ma'am, call the embassy because this is part of their expedited appointment if magta-turning out 21 na even if F2A. We have clients who has been contacted by the embassy even if F2A sila on reasons that mag-IH out na yung client. Delayed lang po. Hindi lang mag-i-interview sa embassy. Then, let's see their updates in the next few months. Melania Cruz, F1, Zoom nag-email again. Contact the embassy ma'am for 221Z, especially dahil mag-expire yung medical niya. Maki, MC, ito yung sinasabi natin, if the MOU between the two governments, hindi to yung agreement mo between the employer at saka ikaw or yung agreement mo and the J1 visa sponsor. This is basically the agreement between the two governments. So, depende kung ano yung program mo. No? So, if it has been signed and agreed before April of this year, then you could actually argue your case. But then again, I would encourage you to contact the embassy and argue your case. Uh, si Ma'am Elsa, kasi na-skip ko to. I'm waiting for my interview and medical appointment. Is it still suspended? My mother was my petitioner, family status, but lost my husband. All kids are only age out. So sorry for your loss. Yung age out, ma'am, I'm not so sure if you have a lawyer, but baka pasok pa sa CSPA yung mga anak mo. If they are, then it might be a good reason to expedite an appointment. Pero yung petitioner mo, US citizen. So, but hindi rin siya pasok doon sa exception generally ng suspension mo because ang sinasabi lang doon is if you are a spouse or a child of a US citizen. So, hindi klaro sa embassy ngayon if they are issuing visas for parent petitioner. But then again, wala pa kaming nakikitang appointments as a parent-child petition. Meron kami nakikitang child-parent pero wala pa yung parent petitioner na ini-interview ng embassy. Okay, so again, thank you very much for tuning in. If I actually hear some developments as far as visa interviews at the embassies abroad, including Manila, of course, kasi maraming taga-Philippines, but also Filipinos who are not living in Manila, we will give a Facebook Live, or if mag-i-issue na naman si Trump ng bagong updates, I will definitely go live for your benefit. So, thank you very much for tuning in. Maraming salamat po.